Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros. I am your host, Cryptosi, and this is the September 2021 update. And this time we're going to go for a little bit of a change of pace. What we try to do roughly once a year is have a podcast episode where we kind of recap, refresh, and keep it not so technical. I'm here with delightful guest Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir?
Uh, it's a mixed bag. A lot of things going on in my life, but working through it all. So,
So, for those of you who are completely unaware, you've joined us at a brilliant time. This is going to be a recap episode, so it's generally going to be one for people who are not quite so technically um, aware, let's say. We're going to discuss loads of different things. What we generally do is dive into the GitHub, discuss the code base, discuss what the Kayaba and the other developers are doing and why, when there are other developers, why there are other developers, why there aren't other developers, all sorts of things to do with Meros as it's being developed from the ground up, from scratch, from and it's been an absolutely amazing ride. So, without any further chit chat from me, let's get started with my first question. So, Kayaba, as we've got a change of pace this month, um, could you start by giving a very brief overview of what Meros plans to be, and then describe how far Meros is from completion?
so of course, the goal of Meros was always to be an instant and feeless option for using cryptocurrency. So, if you want to send money to a friend who you just went out to dinner with, if you want to buy a coffee in the morning, if you want to send it to family abroad or donate to a charity in a foreign country, you can just open up your wallet, get their address, send them money, and within a few seconds, it's completely confirmed. The money's there. The end. And in the process, you don't pay a fee because even if you're just paying a cent in fees, that can be a lot of money to a lot of people around the world. So it really just was meant to be a cryptocurrency, emphasis on the currency, which a lot of projects I feel have looked past in the modern day. And there are a couple strong um, projects currently existing, yet I found enough flaws with them. I kind of wanted to go out on my own, and obviously that's why we're here.
Yes.
So for Meros, there's really two core protocol features. One's effectively been done for a few weeks now. It's just been sitting around, and I'm not exactly happy with the fact it's been sitting around. It's called epochs, or specifically the epochs redo, and it just changes how exactly we finalize transactions when they come up. Um, but yeah, if you count that as finished, then the only thing we have left to do is checkpoints, which is meant to stop attacks against the proof of work system. And once we implement said checkpoints, it's just bug fixes and testing to make sure it's ready to actually start handling actual money.
What's it been like developing a cryptocurrency yourself? How long has it taken, and what's the journey been like for you?
So we've I've been at this for over 3 years, and there has been a lot of rewrites in it. Um, I could probably look at specific folders in the code base and be like, "Yep, completely rewritten that 3 times, completely written that one 5 times." There's been a lot of rewrites because, arguably, when I started Meros, I should not have been writing a cryptocurrency. That said, part of it's about the journey, and obviously I'm here now, and I do think I'm skilled enough to write a cryptocurrency at this point. If I didn't, I wouldn't continue with Meros. I would kind of bow out and let other projects have their fair share. I wouldn't want to obfuscate the space with something not worthwhile. So when you look at that and how I became someone who is capable of building a cryptocurrency, then arguably yes, I was back in the day. Because back in the day I was ready to go through the learning process and so on. So really, it's just been a lot of learning and a lot of improvement. But I am happy with the way Meros is today, and I don't mean to make it sound like an educational or toy project. It's obviously something I put my life into, and it is something I believe can actually make a difference in the space.
If you could go back to meet the Kayaba of, I guess it was early 2018 when you
Mhm.
embarked upon this journey, and you could give him one piece of advice, what piece of advice would you give him?
I really wouldn't want to give any. Butterfly effect is day one thing, and the entire timeline is messed up. And I'm not really happy with how long Meros has taken for a few reasons, but I understand why it's taken that long. And I wouldn't want to do anything to endanger my personal growth or the end result of the project itself.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so for the people on the outside looking in who have maybe watched a few of our state of the projects before, jumped into the Discord, they're a bit excited about the project. They've got various, I guess, different opportunities or roles that they can see for themselves within the project or within the project's ecosystem. What do you think people should be doing in anticipation for Meros? And what I've done is I've broken this down into four different categories. So it's quite a lot of question answering for you to do. But let's start with the most simple one. So a person like me who's just going to buy Meros and hold it. What sorts of things should they be doing or could they be doing in anticipation for the Meros mainnet launch?
So, if we look at how you would get Meros in the early days, you can either mine it or you're going to be buying it from another community member. So, really, what's most important is just to keep an eye on the Discord, watch over it, see what happens, see how people are talking, and actually notice when the network launches and you can get ready. If you want to mine, that's one discussion, or if you just want to buy it, then presumably you just need cryptocurrency and a willing community member. I don't believe we're going to have over the counter trading on our own Discord for a few reasons, but I know a couple community members have mentioned another Discord that kind of specializes in crypto OTC that I at least know they would likely use to buy and sell Meros. And I imagine the community will find its own way.
What about holding Meros? What would be the safest way to hold Meros? I'm assuming it won't be hardware wallets available at launch. So what would you say is the safest way to hold Meros?
We aren't having hardware wallets at launch, but what we will have is watch wallets, where basically you can generate a wallet on one computer and then import the public key into another node. And that node will then keep track of all your funds, all the addresses, so on and so on. And it can even generate transactions that you can bring back to a node that actually has the private key to sign them and handle them. So that's really more of an enterprise feature. It's meant for exchanges with hot wallets and cold wallets and so on, where they can keep an eye on funds without exposing the actual wallets with the funds. But while we won't support hardware wallets at launch, technically, if you wanted to, you definitely could. Sorry, just lost my train of thought for a second there. You definitely could set up a computer without access to the internet, just so you have a secure. Like, no, that would be pretty secure if it doesn't have access to the internet. But you
Yeah.
can set up a secure laptop that has your private key, just so there's no risk of it there, and then have another laptop connected to the internet, which primarily runs Meros. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
Okay, so what if I'm a miner and I would like to mine Meros the day it's launched? What mining algorithm would is Meros using? What would be the best equipment for me to get? And is there anything else I should worry about or look out for?
So Meros uses RandomX, which is a CPU mining algorithm primarily developed for use in Monero, and it has been sponsored by Monero, if I recall correctly. It's definitely been implemented. I'm trying to remember if there was an Monero-funded aspect of it, but I honestly can't. Um, but regardless, it was primarily for Monero. And it's a CPU mining algorithm, which really means that if you're looking for hardware to use with it, you're generally going to be talking Threadrippers. They're great multi-core processors. They're very powerful, and they're pretty affordable given the space. That said, I don't want to say go out and buy hardware because hardware changes every few months to a year. It's a really insane development cycle, especially with the past few years with the resurgence of AMD. So I don't really want to say, oh, buy this one right now and it's going to be great at Meros. Because if Meros takes another few months to launch, there could be new announcements and that could change mining profitability. And I don't want anyone to invest in hardware unless they're sure of it on their end. So that means I don't want to make recommendations, but if you want to learn how to CPU mine, there's plenty of documentation out there, and from there you could come to your own opinion, which you would trust on your own.
People who plan on using Meros. So you did mention before that Meros plans to be an actual cryptocurrency for people
Hmm.
to send money to from one person to another. People who are planning on using Meros, what should they do? Where would they be able to find merchants that are prepared to trade in Meros, or how could they trade in Meros themselves?
So, unfortunately, we won't have a point of sale system at launch. Though now that I think of it, I've actually written one of those before. I wrote one years ago. Um, I don't want to name drop the project for a couple of reasons, but it was actually part of my work at the project that I was working for when we met. I've commented on them
Ah,
previously
okay,
on the
yes,
podcast,
yep.
but again, I don't want to name drop them now. But no, I've actually written a point of sale terminal before. But really, when we look at these businesses in point of sale, none of them are using custom terminals or web servers. They're really using mobile apps like wallets that support basic invoicing features, and they support, enterprise systems. And I think we're going to be out of the reach of enterprise for a while. So if you were a merchant, I can't say it's going to be feasible at launch, and honestly, that sucks. And it's something I wish we could say we had support for. But mainly the question is, when are we going to get a mobile wallet? And I do think that the actual node, and I'm not trying to say run a node on your phone, but I'm saying the node does kind of demonstrate how you can have a view-only wallet, so you can have customers receive crypto but not actually have access to it, so on and so on. So I definitely think a mobile wallet is incredibly feasible, and it's definitely something I'd love to see someday, and it's one of my priorities. And beyond that, I'm actually looking into starting an American business on my end, just to kind of promote adoption, because I have a few ways of how to do that within the cryptocurrency sphere. But honestly, that's too premature to comment. So really, if you want to use it, and you want to do something on day one, even if it's not going out to your favorite place to buy a pair of sneakers, really what you can do is just download a node, get set up with it, get familiar, like just start it up, watch it run, learn how to use the wallet, send a few mirrors around for the hell of it, and just kind of get familiar with it.
What about contributors? What about, let's say, developers, marketers, people who seen what you've been doing for the past few years, have decided they want to join you on this quest to release a true, feeless and instant
So I
cryptocurrency?
mean, those people can step up now. I've actually been looking for a Python developer for a while. Haven't done the best promoting that job opportunity, unfortunately, or position opportunity. I'm not really sure the best way to describe it. Um, but yeah, no, in the past we've had some developers who have contributed, and it's something I've been really appreciative of. There's no one else but me currently, but I actually did have one lead on that Python developer I've been trying to chase down for a couple of weeks now. Just a really good friend of mine who I definitely trust with the position, just with all the right knowledge and everything. Because that's really the problem with a lot of crypto businesses at this time, or crypto projects, organizations, whatever. It's that they can't find people. And while Meros doesn't fall into the business category, it does have the same problem. Um, so yeah, if you want to start contributing, there's no time like the present, and I'd love to get a message about that.
What would be the best platform for people to message you on?
That would be our Discord, which I'm sure you'll have linked in the description.
Link to the Discord down below, as
But
I
the
always.
GitHub, I always try to keep it incredibly well documented. There is a plethora of open issues. I'm happy to answer questions and kind of point people towards what would be the easier ones.
Yeah. Um, One topic that or that I particularly have enjoyed during the past year or so, for people who have been keeping up to speed with our podcast, is the MDF. Now, I wanted to discuss with you what is actually happening with the MDF, and I guess as a follow-on point, how will this affect developer centralization, and what other things or processes or plans do you have at the moment, if you have any, to mitigate developer centralization? As I'm quite sure is something you'd want to
So the Meros Development Fund, good job only using the acronym and not telling anyone what it is.
mitigate.
The Meros Development Fund was a proposed replacement for the initially planned pre-mine, because Meros has had a lot of discussions about economics and pre-mines and so on over the years. And I had a pre-mine, I never liked it, and I'm one day I'm just like, no, I'm done with this, I'm removing it. Um, so the Meros Development Fund was a proposed alternative, which would essentially be a DAO that ran every 6 months for the purposes of funding developers and relevant contributions. And it's something I really like the idea of, especially with the extended timeline, just because thanks to the extended timeline, it wouldn't be able to bog down the project with politics. I feel like most of it would still be on development. And then organizations could spring up who would then respond on a more at need basis. So I could form a multi sig with like you, for example, and then we could get 20% of the project funds, but then we could further distribute that to developers, you know, whenever they have a project that wants funding instead of every 6 months on a rigorous timeline. Um, but I'm still not happy with the design overall. There's still some issues with it. And it's would take a decent amount of time to develop, and I feel like I don't have that before mainnet. I feel like I have to get something out there at this point. So I am prioritizing. We talked about this last time. What should be done before, what should be done after mainnet, what's with it, what can be added on later, what's a pain to add on later, etc. and etc. And I think the MDF isn't going to make the cut. Something I Meros version of the Monero CCS, which is their crowdfunding system, where anyone can create a proposal and then people will donate funds to it, etc. And it's a model I really like, and it does rely on people being generous. But that already is a requirement with a lot of systems. The other issue with it is that it's egalitarian, that people with money decide who gets money. And that is both good and bad because it's the people who are invested, the people who really care about the project, but it's also not democratic and, representative of the people per se. But at the same time, the proposed system for the Meros Development Fund was one coin, one vote. So it already has the same problem where the people with money decide who gets more money. And again, there are advantages to that because it shows these are the people invested and so on. There is there's a lot of pros and cons of either system. I think optimally we would have our own version of the CCS, which would accept donations and itself apply for funding from the MDF. And that MDF funding would then be further distributed to projects under the CCS as one of those organizations we were talking about a few minutes ago. But at launch, I think we're just going to have a CCS style project. And I actually recently talked to someone who is not part of kind of I don't want to say core team because they're definitely not the core team, and I know you would hate that label. Um, but people who have been with Meros for years and following up on like every update and participating in every testnet. I do know someone who's a bit more removed, yet they are decently well known in the crypto space we're in and so on. And they're someone I asked if they would be willing to run it because not only do I think they're removed enough from me that kind of absolves me of conflicts of interest, but also they would still have the community trust and so on. So I do have someone I would like to do that. I'm not entirely sure. They said they're interested, but they'll have to work a few things out. But I would love for them to do it and really get a strong footing there. Um, and that's kind of my plan when regards developer decentralization at this time. It's make sure funding is available for anyone who wants it and create egalitarian processes to obtain funding. And that's still not perfect because arguably that just centralizes development under the CCS or the crowdfunding system or whatever you want to call it. So it's still going to be a long working process, but I think that's a great first step. And then for now, we have another developer centralization problem where it's not about single-handed control of the project, as in if I decide to change the protocol, I'm just going to change the protocol. There's no one else to kind of say, let's talk about that. But I do, of course, try to involve the community with such decisions when it's relevant. But the other problem is that currently I represent a single point of failure. If I don't work for a couple of months because I am moving and have a lot of like changes and need to take contracts to pay my rent, etc., as I have for the past couple of months, Meros doesn't get worked on, and that's a major issue. And there's also questions like, oh no, what if I die? Well, that really suck for Meros.
I guess it
um,
wouldn't be that. I guess it wouldn't be that great for you either.
no, it wouldn't be great for me, but I'm not the important one here.
All right.
Um, so, as part of that discussion, that's why I really want to prioritize finding a Python developer immediately, just to have someone working on it. Because even a Python developer, they're not by name a full node developer, and they want to be able to finish mirrors. But it would at least keep the wheels of development churning and start building out that process of multiple people and a fallback plan. Though I will say, if I do die, I actually have a friend who agreed to take it up. A couple of them, actually.
Okay, interesting. Um,
I plan ahead!
can you can you um can you say who those people are?
I rather respect their privacy in case they actually do die and they're like, wait, he wasn't joking about that?
So
He
it's not
expects me to do
anyone.
it?
It's not anyone famous. Not Satoshi Nakamoto or Charles Hoskinson or no one like that. And
Oh, that was such a bad second example. I hate you for it. You know Hoskinson wants nothing to do with a project like Meros. You know it. No, it's not
I
anyone
want to
famous.
ask
It's a
you
couple
why,
friends
but
of mine.
I want to ask you why you would
Because
think
he
that. But
believes when he left Ethereum, one of the main reasons cited for that was Ethereum was running an organization and he believed cryptocurrency should be run by a corporation, which is why there's IOHK in the modern day. And obviously, Cardano isn't completely controlled by IOHK, and I'm not trying to trash Cardano here, but I'm acknowledging that his ethos is about pre-mines and corporations and so on, and that fundamentally conflicts with Meros's community-driven approach.
fair
You
enough.
probably add back the pre-mine.
I
Set it to 100%. If
I
you
guess
want
that
tokens, you can buy them from me.
I guess that would I guess that's one thing that wouldn't be in doubt, that the pre-mine would be back in place if you decided to leave things to Charles Hoskinson. Um,
Also, a lot of comments about rewriting everything in Haskell.
yeah. But to be fair, I guess Nim is exotic enough a language. He may be happy with
No, Nim has a lot of issues. Even I'm not happy with it at this point.
it. um, if you had money was no option, developers were no option, and you could pick a funding mechanism for Meros and it would be ready in an instant. Do you have an idea now of what that funding mechanism would be if you could do anything?
I think the system itself providing funds for its users and its developers really is the best way forward. Because when you look at a donation based system like the CCS of Monero, someone's giving up their money, and that can be because they believe in it, because they think they're giving up a small enough percentage that the overall return by the project will be greater. There's a lot of reasons for it, but I think there's also a blockage and an objection there. So I do think the system being able to distribute coins itself is important. And that's kind of how I would like to see the project funded. But as the project hasn't launched yet, it can't exactly issue coins. So I'd really just like to set up to get Meros finished immediately. I'd probably just want to set up an American corporation which just pays people as needed, because that would just quickly handle the legal side of things and move forward. It would be very efficient. And it's not really at a point where we can quantify a community. We can't say by amount of Meros. If you go by contributions to Meros itself, then it's just me anyways. You know, so I probably just want to set up a business just to start paying the right people to get involved, and from there transition over to a DAO.
Does Meros have a coin supply limit?
Interesting question. No, it does not. It's part of the economic system because we're fearless that a continuous inflation is needed.
Does that mean that over time, Meros will just continually get printed and printed and printed? People who, I guess not nowadays, but prior to 2017, people who joined crypto generally joined it for the scarcity as opposed to.
Meros is still going to be scarce. No individual can walk up and spread billions of the stuff, and there is a rather extreme curve to ensure a large initial distribution as well as over time distribution before trailing off to a minimal amount, which will become a smaller and smaller percent
Who
as time
decided?
continues.
Who decided upon that curve?
We had a community call about that, and you were there, so you know that.
Yes, I know, but I'm not. I'm not asking these questions for my own benefit. Uh, I'm just making sure that everybody understands
No,
that
but
these
that is
things
something we
happen.
had a community call about because it
Yeah.
was important for everyone, and we got a lot of good feedback and contributions to that, and I'm really happy about that. Um, So yeah, no, we had that call, and that's where we kind of decided it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
do want to say earlier, I think I said I would create a corporation just to, or a company, like an American LLC, just to get payments out. I could also do it as an organization. There was no real reason for it to be a company. My point was, if I had money and money wasn't an option, I would try to use it. That was my end point, with the simplest means of doing so. Yeah,
Are you thinking back on your words and thinking that you sounded
kind of
incredibly
like
Charlie
Hoskins
like?
MD. Yeah, no, that's not the vibe I'm going for. And obviously, the company wouldn't have a pre-mine. It wouldn't have control, copyright, or patents over the code base, etc. Like that's not going to happen. But I do want to be clear. Like I'm just trying to get people paid here.
Okay. Next steps for Meros. What happens after the mainnet launch? What are the main features you're going to think about adding in the future? I've got a few that I'm going to throw out there, and then I'm going to leave the floor open for you to throw out a few. First one, obviously, given my past history with other privacy coins, is privacy. Will you be adding privacy to Meros at any time? If so,
Even if we add privacy, it still won't hide how badly you say it.
it's the way proper people speak the Queen's language. So, so, so if you are going to add privacy, how
Privacy.
how would you how would you do it? And if not, then why not?
So one of the things I was incredibly familiar with is Monero's ring CGs, because even though I couldn't comment on how they work internally, I know a good bit of cryptography, still not that much. So even though I couldn't fully comment on how they work, I did understand they existed. Here's how they look in a transaction. Here's how they're interacted with, etc. and etc. And because of that, I really appreciated it. In the modern day, I recently got familiar with Zcash, and their next network upgrade should remove the trusted setup, which was one of my biggest objections to it, and it's a much stronger privacy technology. So in the modern day, I think I would probably go for ZK Snarks at this point if I was to add privacy. Just because
Oh,
I've also gotten more familiar with that. And again, the removal of the trusted setup is a big part of that. If you kept the trusted setup, I would not say that. But now that I'm
okay,
familiar with it, and due to the stronger privacy, that's kind of the way I'm leaning.
right, okay.
But that
Is it is
isn't
it
something that you're going to see at launch.
no,
I
definitely
mean, it could be planned over the next 6 months, but I wouldn't expect to see it for the first year if it's even added after that. There's a
okay.
lot of trials and tribulations needed to add it.
Smart contracts. How about adding
I
some
have no
sort of
interest in those, and you're dead to me for asking about
how
this.
about how about adding some form of EVM or some form of
Smart
programmable
contracts
element?
largely clog up cryptocurrency networks. I I have trouble justifying them when you say you need currency. And this isn't trying to promote Bitcoin either. I think Bitcoin script is its own mess. And obviously has benefits because it enables atomic swap, the Lightning Network, and obviously smart contracts have benefits because it enables tokens, dexes, so on and so on. So obviously everything here has some level of benefit over something else. But when you're talking about currency, I really do like the idea of just a pure currency. And at one point, Meros was going to have a script language of its own comparable to Bitcoin, but we scrapped that for a few reasons. And
Were the reasons mostly to do with resources or philosophical?
resources, I wasn't entirely happy with it. I didn't like the idea of it being there, and the one thing I really wanted it there for was atomic swaps, and we implemented atomic swaps without needing the scripting language on Meros. So a few different reasons, but yeah.
So if you get your way, there won't be smart contracts at all. However,
I think smart contracts only are viable once you have a sharded network. So in the future, if Meros adds sharding, I'd be all for adding it, just because we would already have a solution for the scaling issues that smart contracts presents. But
well,
because we are not currently sharded and we do not have a full solution for the scaling problem, then no, I'm not going to be for smart contracts.
well, I know you've not ever been a podcast host, but you spent a lot of time with probably the best podcast host in the world, and you've just done a brilliant segue into my next question. Sharding. Do you have
Hmm.
sharding on Meros? If so, what features would that provide, and how would that enhance the end user's experience?
Uh, so sharding means a lot of things, and you can't exactly just say, "Oh yeah, we can have sharding." The question is, how do you want to do that sharding? What you know, and there are a few different paths we could take. But it's not something at Meros at launch, and it's not something that's going to be there for a while, just because it's a massive developmental effort, and it requires a lot of research to go in ahead of it. And honestly, before we did sharding, I'd be more interested in moving Meros to a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus system, which just means instead of proof of work mining, it's proof of stake, and it has a lot more guarantees about finality and security, which I really appreciate. So,
Are you one of these people who doesn't want to add scaling technologies until you've reached a point where the network has been clogged up, or do you try to add it before the network gets clogged up?
I do acknowledge you don't need scaling technologies if no one's using your network, but if your network does get to a point where it's too clogged up to be usable, then arguably it's failed. So I don't want to appear as a centrist, but I think there's a bit merit to either side. But I think what is practically going to happen is Meros will launch. It won't be sharded. That won't matter because it won't need it. But if it succeeds in the time it would take to develop sharding, we will already hit our congestion limits. And there's a lot more optimizations we can do before then on a protocol level, on a node level, on a like there's a lot of optimizations we can do before then. It's not like, okay, we're launching with one TPS. That's it. None of you get anything else. No. Even without sharding, we can greatly increase our TPS number. It is going to be more than one TPS. um, but there is going to be work involved there. So hopefully we don't get to a point where we're like Ethereum or Bitcoin. And I mean, we are feeless, but we use a proof of work to beat the spam filter. So that may just mean that sending a transaction takes a minute of CPU time, which also isn't feasible in its own way. So there's a lot of there's a lot to consider, but I definitely want to try to scale before the time comes where we had to have scaled already.
Yeah. Another buzzword. I know you love buzzwords. Non-fungible tokens, NFTs. We had touched on this in one of the podcasts, I'm going to say around a year ago. And whilst I was extremely excited at the prospect, you were less so excited by the prospect. What are the chances that we could see NFTs on Meros at all?
The protocol will have the building blocks for them if someone wants to set up a wallet, which technically has them, they could. Um, I think the NFT market is greatly overblown, insane, and idiotic right now. I think there's, I think it is a perfect example of the greater fool's theory with a decent chance of money laundering, just like a lot of crypto. Um, but I do appreciate, like, on a base level, if you say NFTs, whether it be for video games, whether it just be a piece of art, and you want to say you own it, I do understand that. I am a big collector of physical media. If there's a TV show I really like, I try to go on whatever site and like purchase the season of it. You know, if I can, I really love having my own copy and being able to say that copy's mine. I will always have that copy. Everyone else can burn theirs. Everyone else can remove streaming services. I will have my copy. That is mine. So I do kind of appreciate just the idea of owning something and being a part of something and so on. Um, so I do understand it, and I wouldn't necessarily mind if NFTs are added to Meros as long as they don't break the chain, but it's also not something I'm personally excited about.
Finally, um, partnerships. Within crypto, there are projects that go a great make a great deal of noise and buzz by having partnerships, and then there are other cryptos as you're uh, saying at the moment that you'd like to be community led. That does make it almost impossible to have partnerships. What will Meros do? or will it be possible for Meros to have partnerships with other enterprises or organizations?
So Monero has a really interesting aspect here, and it kind of serves as a case study. But there are a lot of people who say they're employed by Monero, and they say they're working for Monero, and they partnered with Monero, et cetera, et cetera. And the common definition of that is whether or not their crowdfunding system gave you money. If you submit a proposal for $1,000 through the crowdfunding system to make a YouTube video, and someone gives you $1,000, people say, "Yeah, I got hired by Monero to make a video." So I think that's one way of doing it, but the other way is kind of looking at the contributors to Meros, whether it be through code, community, marketing, whatever, and getting them personally to partner with you. And that is kind of saying core team, but it also just kind of the way the world works. The things we just have to keep in mind is if I ever say Meros is partnering with someone, does that mean Meros is being listed on their payment terminals? Or does that mean I'm trying to implement consensus hard forks to give a third party an advantage? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it would be fair if I personally helped someone get Meros on their payment system to say Meros partnered with them. Just because I'm a lead developer of Meros, like even if you just look by lines of code contributed, I'm lead. Um, there's a lot to go by the other people in running. Um, So yeah, I
So,
think that would be fair to say because it's also them saying, "Hey, I want to work with the Meros community and get the Meros currency working with my shop, with my store, etc." And I think that alone could count as a partnership.
so in that sense, then, if somebody decides to go and do something bad, and they say they would like some money
Yes, that's when
from
the
it,
community discounts them and says, "No, we never talked to this guy or supported him."
yeah.
But of course, anyone can go up to any project and say, "I'm partnered with you." It's a decentralized organization. There's no actual definition on partnership. So the question is just who wants to claim they're partnered and what the community responds with. If the community responds like that sounds like a good idea, implicitly giving it a pass, or explicitly if it's talked about before, or if the community's like, "No, we hate you, get out."
But currently, there is no plans for a way to actually measure the
Like I said,
consensus within the
the
community.
way Monero largely does it is if you got funded by them.
But that could
And with them,
be individual, right? So that could just be one person says, "Okay, yeah, I'll give you the $2,000 for you to go and throw
but it
rocks
also
at."
provides a case study for Meros to look at. And yeah, you can obviously launder that. You can pay $2,000 to yourself and say, "Oh yeah, you guys funded me," you know.
Well, that's a
But
great idea. I could be a partner with Monero, couldn't
but
I?
the other part of Monero though is that there is trusted community members reviewing proposals and kind of discarding the ones they don't think contribute enough to the ecosystem. So there is a centralized review process there. So that's also a clause.
um,
Not to mention that if anyone realizes, hey, you sent money to yourself, you would just called out for it.
but I guess trusted community members doesn't fit because once the project gets big enough,
Mhm.
a community member could be trusted by 10,000 people,
Yep.
absolutely hated by 10,000 people. It's
hmm So it's not really something with any answer. It's just kind of what feels right and what people are willing to work with.
yeah. So it's a play it by ear at the moment.
Side note: if you want to get on the Ethereum pre-mine, I can partner with you right now. I have run an Ethereum node in the past. I've deployed smart contracts on it. Therefore, I am an active Ethereum developer.
Exactly.
And if
Exactly.
you want to partner with me and therefore
Exactly.
Ethereum,
So
just
the
send
news
twenty
could
thousand
be
dollars of Bitcoin to this address.
so the news could be Meros is partnering with Ethereum to become Ethereum's currency of choice.
And that would be total bullshit because the Ethereum community would call us out. The overall crypto community would realize it's stupid and we get called out. So it really is kind of how the community responds to it and what the community thinks of it at that point.
Okay.
And there's no real way to get a definite answer. But I mean, I would say Meros has partnered with you, but at the same time, no, the Meros blockchain has not published artificially intelligent statement that it partnered with you.
No.
And you're not getting any part of any pre-mine because there isn't one, but the community largely acknowledges your presence as our podcast host.
Are there any other features that I haven't mentioned that you feel you would like to add to Meros within the first 12 months?
There are some pretty technical optimizations I won't get into, but that's about it. I think
Nice.
the first 12 months is really going to be about establishing ourselves, increasing stability, and increasing throughput of the system, rather than new and better features.
No buzzwords, no DeFi, no master nodes for those of you who've been around for more than two
Oh
years.
gosh.
No,
Cryptocurrency has rotted your brain.
no colored coins, no nothing like that. Okay.
Cryptosi, I will get you the help you need. I know a group.
Uh,
They're generally for
Kayaba,
drug addicts, but cryptocurrency addicts works too.
Kayaba. I'd like to thank you for donating your time and your effort, your gigantic brain to this podcast, and just enjoyed the thing. Oh, there was one more question I actually did have.
Oh yeah, what's up?
Transactions per second. What's it looking like the transactions per second will be upon the launch of Meros? And how do you plan on increasing that number, or do you plan on increasing that number? And up to what do you think you will plateau at?
So I've historically said I would be happy if we matched Bitcoin on transactions per second at the very start with the very first release of our node, which isn't multi-threaded, it's single-threaded right now, which sucks. And that's one optimization we can do where multi-threading would do us 2 to 4x as fast. It'd really be a great improvement. But that's one improvement I'd like to name among others. But I'd be happy with matching Bitcoin, which is a flat 7 or 14 now that SegWit's a thing, or if you want to count Lightning, But I would be happy with a flat 7 to even 10. And it's really hard to kind of track because I can set up a clean room environment with a bullshit server and tell you right now Meros can do 1,000 TPS. You hit mainnet,
Yes.
it'll do nowhere near that. Um,
um, I wanted
but
to.
what on
Oh,
the last
yeah,
test
sorry.
net, we actually did have someone TPS the network, or spam the network to see what happened. And I believe they hit 7 TPS, which is my target, but there's a caveat here. I'm pretty sure they were bottlenecked by the by the spam check. As in, if they had multiple spam programs running at once, it would have gone through. So I believe the spam filter, as of right now, it has you try 3 or 5 times per transaction. Um, so that means that they are truly bottlenecked by the spam filter. Say that's taking up 50% of their time, and I think it's a much higher number. I probably guess it's 80 to 90%. And then the network only has to run that once, even if you have to run that 5 times, meaning the network can do 5 times as many transactions as you can in that same amount of time. So that would put our TPS at anywhere from 20 to 35, which I'd be pretty happy with. But also, it wasn't scientific, and obviously, I'm saying I think they were bottlenecked by that, and if they were, then there's these conditions, and I can't really give a good answer about that. And honestly, we'll just have to wait and see. One of the things we can do is multi-thread the code base. The other thing we can do is just look at what's slow and kind of write smarter algorithms around it. The voting process can be massively sped up, yet that will require a protocol change. But that protocol change would be very significant for voting, potentially cutting down the voting process by 20x. So there's definitely a lot of improvements out there and a lot of great things we can do.
Um, we're going to go off topic a little bit now, and we're going to discuss Cardano. Recently, they had some, I'm going to call it FUD for lack of a better word, where people were saying that when they do their smart contracts, they're limited to one transaction per second.
I did see this, and the comment was it's not one transaction per smart contract per block, it's one transaction per user per block due to the UTXO system. And I don't see how that's an issue per se, because I don't know enough about the Cardano system. Theoretically, when you have an unspent transaction output, which means Cryptosi, I send you money, you now have unspent funds from me, as in you have yet to spend them yourself. And it's a transaction output because I had a transaction and it outputted funds to you. Let's say you send the funds to your friend Bob, and I send you $5 and you only send your friend Bob 3. So you had a second output to yourself worth $2. Cryptosi, you now have $2. Good for you. Theoretically, with that $2, you can then go spend it and say, "Hey, Charlie, you want $2?" Or Alice, you want $2? And theoretically, you can say, hey, this transaction to Bob, the first one Cryptosi made, it hasn't finalized yet. It's going to be in the next block. That said, I trust myself not to screw you. So I'm going to send a transaction to you for $2, building off Bob's. That's perfectly valid in Bitcoin. It's valid in Ethereum, etc., etc. And because of that, I don't understand why that limit is in place in Cardano, because theoretically you can just grab the newly created UTXO and continue doing your stuff. So I honestly don't know enough about the Cardano to say where their system was bottlenecked, how much it actually impacts users, and how much of it is on the Cardano level versus just the current wallet implementation level. I don't know enough to comment on this.
What it uh, made me consider, and a comment,
Hmm.
it was a comment that I actually saw, was about the importance of peer review.
Yes.
I guess we could liken it to code audits, let's say for Meros. You have spoken for code audits, but your code auditing
Immense
before.
respect as long as they're done by the right people. I don't like most auditors.
Yeah. So, well, that was going to be the question, really. How important do you think it is? I know I've said I was going to let you
I
go,
think it's
Kai.
incredibly valuable. I don't think Meros is going to launch with one, extremely unfortunately. I know that was originally something I really, really wanted to do,
Mhm.
but they're expensive and time consuming and so on. So I think Meros is going to settle for extensive testing and extensive simulation, uh, which is unfortunate, but the way it is. But code audits are great because it really just helps you find issues and so on and so on. And I really respect them, and I wish we could get one done.
Um, Even if you did have a code audit, would you still have extensive testing?
Oh, of course, you need both.
Yeah,
The testing makes sure that something doesn't break in the future. Code audits just say you didn't miss anything or do anything wrong at a specific moment.
right. Okay, Kai, but this time I promise I will let you go. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure as
Thank you,
always.
Cryptosi.
We shall be back in the October 2021 update when I will be grilling you about checkpoints. No
All right,
pressure.
sounds good.
Right, thank you very much. And for those of you who have watched this through to the end, if there was something that I didn't ask, which you'd like me to ask Kayaba, join the Discord and just pop the question in there. You can at me at Cryptosi if you like. There's a state of the project Meros channel in the Discord as well. Or you could find me on Twitter, or you could find Kayaba on Twitter, or well, don't come to my house. But we're on the where you'd like to ask us questions, ask us, and I will try to add them to the next podcast if I possibly can. Uh, Kayaba is quite private about certain things, so please keep the questions beard or Meros related. Thank you very much, Kayaba. Is there anything else you'd want to say before we sign off?
No, but thank you again, as always, for hosting this. It's always great to have you as it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. I will see you next month and we're going to talk about checkpoints. Goodbye.
Bye.